Air Live, good evening. Welcome into the program. It is, well, it's not a hunting show. As I looked at myself, I'm like, yeah, I'm loaded for bear. And so we're going to go up in the hills. There is snow on the mountains. Listen, this is the Audible, the footballguys.com podcast. I am your host, Johnny Appleseed, Cecil Lammy, as we prepare to talk about the world of fantasy football. Matt Waldman, Dr. Gene Bramall joining me, and a big, big game on Thursday night. We can rarely say that Thursday night is this big of a contest. We'll get you a game update. We'll talk about the after effects, and we'll talk to Dr. Gene Bramall. Footballguys.com is the podcast. Matt, initial swipe on the Thursday night game. We'll go over it briefly here, and then we'll jump in with Dr. Gene.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people thought this was going to be a LeGarrette Blount game. Turned out to be a Deion Lewis game as well. Much more of a Deion Lewis game in the passing game, going to him early and often, and he's getting a lot of yards and touchdown. He scored a touchdown up the middle on a blown coverage, and then you also have one earlier in the game from Rob Gronkowski. And the Patriots defense, they're stopping Miami on the outside, and they are basically limiting them quite a bit to the point that they're shut down, sacked, and not really doing anything compared to what they did last week.
Yeah, we'll continue that. We'll give you game updates as that thing goes on tonight. Dr. Gene Bramall, our injury specialist, of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall, and a couple of interesting players coming back from injury this week, and one I'll start with Pittsburgh. It is Ben Roethlisberger returning from his knee injury. Dr. Gene, what are your thoughts and expectations for Big Ben upon his return?
I think he's coming back, and I think the expectation is that he'll play, and I think he'll probably play well. I was a little bit surprised to hear on Sunday, Monday, maybe even into Tuesday, that Ben, maybe after feeling a little bit of soreness more than what he expected last week during practice, wasn't certain that he'd be able to go, but practiced fully without restrictions on Wednesday and again on Thursday. I think the Steelers have been angling over the past 2 weeks for him to come back in this big divisional game against Cincinnati from the beginning, and the fact that he's been able to get through a couple of consecutive full practices tells you that he's comfortable in the brace that he's going to play with, and I think it means that he's going to be able to be mobile in the pocket. He may not be the same Ben Roethlisberger that we've seen in the past where 4 or 5 guys hang on him, he sheds them and still makes a play, but I don't see any reason why he can't be effective in the pocket and effective throwing the ball downfield. I think he's pretty much good to go this week, barring some sort of setback in Friday's practice.
Dr. Morgan Freeman, James Starks, or Eddie Lacy?
Neither. I don't know. I think, there's been some good things out of Green Bay to make me think that Eddie Lacy is over whatever was going on with that ankle. And I think the mechanism on video was pretty clearly a low ankle sprain. But as we've said with lots of guys over the past couple of years, that doesn't mean that it's just a 1 or a 2 day thing. Some of these ankle injuries, low ankle sprains, can be multi-week situations, especially if you try to play on them. Depending on which ligament is injured, it can be a little bit easy. It can be tougher than you think to tape that up and play through those injuries. And I think that's where Lacy was. And we heard some conditioning concerns this week from Lacy coming out of the bye week. I was heavier than I expected. I had difficulty maintaining my conditioning during this injury period. So I'm hoping that we see him a little bit healthier and definitely more effective this week. Whether that means he's going to get more than 50% of the snaps probably has more to do with the health of James Starks, which is under question, than how Lacy is feeling himself. Starks was back to a limited practice on Thursday after not practicing on Wednesday. I believe that's the case. Let me look at my quick little sheet here today. So I think that's a good sign that things are progressing. And whether that's them checking him out on Thursday to make sure he feels okay on Friday, or this was a planned progression of practice through the week to get him ready and they really don't have any concern at all, is tough to tell. In most situations, I don't think it would be much to worry about. We know Green Bay's medical staff often takes more time to return players to play than other medical staffs may. So Friday's going to be big, both whatever practice he's able to do. If it's a full practice, great, no concerns, and then we're going to be dealing with the running back by committee. If it's limited and we hear good things in the locker room after practice on Starks and or Lacy, probably the same thing. They're going to be splitting carries based on effectiveness and health. If he's not able to do much tomorrow, then maybe it is going to be the Lacy show. But, as we say so often on Thursday night, much is going to depend on how practice goes Friday morning and what folks have to say in the media after practice.
Yeah, Eddie Lacy was told to stay off the ankle and drink plenty of liquids. They didn't tell him the liquid shouldn't be lard. So there's that. We'll move on and talk about another coming back from injury. It's Dez Bryant. Now, Matt Castle's not afraid to make challenging throws. He's just not very good at them. Dez Bryant being back, that's going to aid any quarterback. Well, maybe not Brandon Whedon, but the point is, like, Bryant's back, and there are certain veterans out there, Dr. Gene, and Ben Roethlisberger is one of them, and I believe that Bryant is one of them as well. It'd be better if Romo was in, but in the current situation with Dallas, what are you expecting from Dez Bryant upon his return?
Well, I was expecting that he wasn't going to do much this week. He was going to continue to recondition, make sure he was healthy, and then maybe come back in some limited fashion, some high leverage situations, as we so often talk about with some of these high profile players. They're going to come back sooner than when they're 100%. But the way he looked just in some limited motion. Last week in the video, we saw him during the pregame, and no, he wasn't moving very quickly, but he didn't seem to have any trouble exploding off his feet to catch balls in the air and then landing without really any restriction. He didn't seem to be nervous about landing on his feet after what looked like a good 36-inch vertical leap on one of the clips I saw. And then for him, although he's not fully practicing, for him to come back and do some stuff Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday without any issues, and for everybody that's observing the situation to say he looks like he's moving as he normally does, I think is pretty reassuring. I also think it's likely that he's going to have some pain and that he's going to, he's playing with that orthotic in a shoe, which will help. But my sense as we go through Wednesday, Thursday practice is that not only is he going to play, but at this point, I would expect him to play most of the snaps. Now, whether he's going to be able to run routes effectively from, snap 40 to snap 60, I don't know the answer to that question. But unless we hear something unusual on Friday, or the Cowboys all of a sudden suggest that they're going to be a whole lot more cautious than what we know they've planned to do with Bryant over the past 7 weeks, then I think we see Dez Bryant probably play 50 to 60 snaps and hopefully play effectively.
Well, just a quick little game update here. Miami's driving there at the 1 yard line after a couple of nice passes to Kenny Stills and then a nice roll to the left to hit Jordan Cameron. And now they just scored with a nice little dive up there to Lamar Miller. So now they're on the board. Emmanuel Sanders and his shoulder injury, what's going on with that? And do we expect him to play at all?
Yeah, and I think Cecil can probably follow up on this a little bit for us, but we heard low-grade AC sprain. He had 2 weeks to not take any hits, both in practice. I mean, I think he's probably doing some things in pads, but he's not taking hits in the same way that he will in game time. And we saw something similar from Randall Cobb, but I think although we didn't really get a grade on Cobb's AC sprain, it was clearly something significant. We were worried about him being out for multiple weeks when we first saw it happen. So it's something that can be padded. It's something that can play through. But as we've seen with lots of players in the past, it's something that can be aggravated easily. But we've also seen A.J. Green went through this a couple of years ago, and there have been some other wide receivers that have not been limited at all and haven't had any setbacks or concerns. And I think that extra week of not having to worry about playing 60 snaps with that shoulder, blocking, separating from man coverage, taking hits downfield, reaching away from his body for the ball, was a good thing. So the limited practices don't bother me all that much, and unless Cecil is hearing something different out there closer to Denver, I'm hopeful that Emmanuel Sanders' situation is going to be a lot more positive and easier to deal with and more effectively to deal with for him than what we saw from Cobb.
Yeah, the word is, and again, we'll never know because they were on bye, but the word is he could have played last week. If it one of those, like, end of the season, get you into the playoff seeding type thing, like, he would have played. So the report's very positive about Emmanuel Sanders. We'll see if the Broncos can run the ball and can keep Aaron Rodgers somewhat contained. It is the Audible Live every Thursday night right here on youtube.com/footballguys.com. We also post this show in the Audible feed as well. Many thanks to listening to the Audible. Again, record-setting numbers. We appreciate each and every one of you yet again this year. Let's talk about Carlos Hyde not practicing with the foot thing, not getting better. They say it can't get worse. How do you take that, Dr. Gene? We're like, well, it can't get any worse if he plays. Well, he's not good right now. Like, he needs to get healthy. He needs time off. Use Mike Davis, use Reggie Bush, but give him some time off. Doesn't seem like they're going to do that. Where do you stand on Carlos Hyde in this foot injury that just won't go away?
Yeah, so I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, and I don't pretend to be one, and I'm not going to be one for Halloween this week. So I think that you have to take the docs at their word when they say whatever injury he has is something that's not going to be aggravated and worsened. And I don't think that's an unreasonable position for certain stress fractures in and around the foot. However, as we've seen, whenever we hear that statement about a player, and in particular a running back, things don't get better. He's not going to miraculously improve within the 4 or 5 days he has to get treatment before he preps for the next game. Now, I think he looked okay last week, but this is a situation very similar to what we saw with Andre Ellington, although they're different injuries. Any foot injury around a running back, be it turf toe, be it a tendon strain, be it a mid-foot injury, be it a stress fracture around the areas we're talking about, it's just going to be something that is almost a snap-to-snap thing for me more than anything else. And yes, I think he looked pretty well last week, but you'd say the same thing about John Brown, who looked okay last week and now is going to struggle to get on the field this week. We need to see what Hyde is able to do in practice on Friday. Last week he was able to come back and do a little bit more. That was reassuring enough, and then watching him play after that, I think we'll have a pretty good sense based on what his practice participation is, because he sort of set the baseline there. But this is not something that's going to go away this year. It's something that's going to linger. It's something that you hope doesn't get, even though it may not, what they're saying is it may not be made worse enough to require surgery at some point. I think that's what they're telling us. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be more painful for him to play through as the weeks go on.
Gene, well, tell us a little bit more about Smokey Brown.
Yeah, Bruce Arians, I think, has been pretty straightforward with his injury stuff. In the last couple of weeks, he said, John Brown doesn't have to practice to play, and we're still optimistic that he's able to go. This week, Tuesday, Wednesday, into Thursday, he's been saying, we want to get him right. We want to make sure he's fully healthy. We'll sort of see how things go. And 2 hamstring strains. He's at high risk for aggravating either one and or a different compensatory injury as we go. The fact that he's not practiced at all this week after a Monday night game just tells you that there wasn't a whole lot of time for him to recover and continue to rehab. And taking Arians' statements at face value, I think, is probably the right thing to do here. I would be surprised if he played on Sunday at this rate, leaving open the possibility for him to feel better on Friday, do a little bit of practice, and for Arians to change his tune. But if we don't hear something much more positive than what we've heard through the middle of the week, I think that
It is the Audible Live. Dr. Gene Bramwell joining us for a couple more turns here. Dr. Gene, we'll cut you out here tonight. Antonio Gates, and may miss multiple weeks now. Didn't we already kind of think this? Because an MCL sprain, again, I'm not a doctor or anything, but, I mean, we've seen this multiple times with different players. Like, it's about a month. MCL sprain, about a month. What do you think about Gates?
Yeah, any skill position player. We've seen some linebackers and other players come back a little bit sooner from this injury than others, but it's more than just a pain situation, as we've talked about with the quarterbacks that have dealt with these MCL sprains over the past month. It has to do with how that knee feels under the body. Is it a stable situation? And Gates was telling us last week that he just didn't feel right. It's not something he dealt with before. And I think on video it looked like, you can't grade a knee ligament sprain on video, but it didn't look like just a little tweak that he had a good chance to recover in a week from. So I was a little bit surprised when we heard in the lead up to Sunday's game that he had a chance to play, or that he could have played. I was much less surprised to hear on Monday when the beat writers came out and said, this is much closer to a multi-week injury than just a one-week situation. So there was a little bit of a fooler I think we got on Sunday. I think with him not practicing Wednesday, Thursday, as we said with so many other players, once a player misses that first week and recognizes that it's an injury that's going to take some time to recover from, it's much easier, it's much more likely for those absences to stretch into 2 to 3 weeks after they've missed 1 week. We saw it with Alshon Jeffrey this year. We've seen it with so many other players. And I think that's what we're going to see. I don't know if it's going to turn into a 4 to 6 week situation. It's very possible he could be back for week 9, but I think he's pretty doubtful to play this week.
Josh McCown and the boy King. So what's going on in Cleveland with the quarterback situation?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard a whole lot about that. I think what we heard earlier in the week made me a little bit nervous about things. Is McCown practiced at all this week? I have to say I haven't noticed whether or not he's been on that either. I'm going to do a quick search here, and I'll kind of babble on while I try to get my cursor in the right place.
I'm looking at our newswire now, and our Thursday practice report is like Johnny Manziel, elbow, like all these guys limited.
So he was limited today. He didn't practice on Wednesday, was limited on Thursday, which I think is probably a good sign for him, simply because the way he walked off the field and the way he was holding his arm made it look like it was something more than a low-grade injury. So maybe it was just a bruise. Maybe he's been feeling a little bit better. The injury report doesn't tell me how much he threw and whether or not they felt like he could be effective in practice. We've seen limited can mean lots of different things. So if we continue to see him increase his practice participation, I think it's clear that the Browns aren't ready to play Manziel for all sorts of different reasons. But to my knowledge, they haven't signed anybody else, and that would tell me that I think they're at least hoping that McCown's going to be able to practice a little bit more on Friday and go. But this situation we're going to have to look into a little bit more closely before we get to Sunday and know for sure.
He is Dr. Gene Bramwell. You can check him out on Twitter at Gene Bramwell, and of course check out his work at footballguys.com. Dr. Gene, good evening, kind sir.
Absolutely. I'll try to put on my best Morgan Freeman costume for Friday and Saturday night. See if I can do it. I don't do a very good Morgan Freeman impression, although I think I think I'm getting getting enough wisdom in my beard that I might be able to at least pull off the face.
There we go.
Have a good rest of your week, gentlemen.
You too. Dr. Gene Bramwell. Out. Athena, out. Anyway. That's from Just Friends. Speaking of Just Friends, Matt Waldman, man alive. Love talking football with you, baby. Let's jump into this game. And, of course, we got our game update. Still a couple of touchdowns for Tom Brady. You've got 247 yards. One of the touchdowns is Deion Lewis, who's got almost 100 receiving yards, over 100 all-purpose yards. People that started him are happy. Rob Gronkowski with 80 yards and a touchdown. People who started him probably still want more. Don't get greedy, okay? I got Gronk, he only got 80 and a touchdown. Stop being like that. Brandon LaFell with 3 for 22 right now. Just in building that confidence, going back to him. I talked to Bo Scaife earlier today. I was like, what's that like when your quarterback just keeps throwing to you? And he talked about a time when he was getting thrown at, I think it was Vince Young, and he was dropping everything, and Vince kept feeding him. He said, it's either the worst day of your life or great for your confidence. But for him, it was worse. Like, stop throwing to me. It's not my day. Like, I can't do it. But with LaFell, 3 for 22, I don't believe people were crazy for starting LaFell today. I don't think people were rushing to the lineups, grabbing their smartphones or whatever. But just your thoughts here, LaFell. We've seen a little bit tonight, of course, and then that confidence that Brady had showed with him through the drops is not connecting yet. Maybe later they get something done. We got about 7 minutes left in the third quarter right now. But your thoughts on LaFell and that connection with Brady, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to think early on what they were trying to do is get his confidence back by throwing him some short passes, throwing him the screen pass. They just tried to hit him on a crossing route, but pressure got to Brady enough that he had to throw the ball off balance and into the dirt near his back leg. So, I mean, what you're looking here is that the effort's continuing to go there. They feel like that this is the guy that they need to be really that outside presence for them. And then, with Amendola and Edelman to balance it out, it will really make this passing game click in a way that it'll be hard for anybody to choose anything. But fortunately for New England, I think the story is that Amendola for the past 2 weeks has played so well and has been able to stay healthy, at least at this point, that you can look at that, and he's a guy that I think a lot of people probably looked at as a reasonable flex starter bye week play if they were able to pick him up a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it's 22-7 right now. Let's say this game finishes, and let's say, Matt, it's 22-17, something like that. And I know this is like a sports radio-y topic, but I just want to pick your brain on whether or not there can be a moral victory for Miami, because we know that Miami had been the bully, roughing up some AFC South teams. That's fine, whatever. But going up against New England, a whole different story, a whole different level of test. So for this team with Dan Campbell, the bicep with the face, and that meathead football, which I love as a former meathead myself, some would say current, is there any sort of moral victory to take away to be like, hey, we fought, we came back, we fell short?
I think that it would be a very minor one, and in the case of being that they would be 3-4, they'd still be in it. They probably wouldn't feel like that that their season is anywhere close to being over. So I think that they'd still have reason for hope that if they played better, that if they were able to play a little bit better down the stretch in this game, that they'd have something that they could build on for the coming weeks. And then you look at the fact that, they're going to get to face, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Dallas. These are all going to be big games for them. Buffalo's been hurting a little bit, so that they could have a good opportunity there to beat them at home, away at Buffalo on the road. And then if they can if the big game will be Philadelphia. I mean, if they can handle Philadelphia as Philadelphia is starting to round into form in Philadelphia, then I think that you're going to see a much more hopeful team. But this week, I think it's more of a, it's an important game, but I don't think they're going to look at it as a morale maker or breaker.
Well, let's talk about morale making with Joyke Bell. We've got Jim Bob Cooter, and now officially taken over Crockett Gilmore as the best name in all of football. But Jim Bob Cooter takes over and running that Lions offense. And this one's against Kansas City. It's in London, a damn London game. Sorry. Love the London fans. We have London listeners. We have London callers into the show. But listen, London Calling, there it is. Joyke Bell. Now, we know that team had a fierce loyalty to Joyke Bell. We know that on a very small group of carries, he looked better in this last week, this time out with Joyke Bell. And, of course, Amir Abdullah is still in that conversation as well. They need to use him the right way. They're not using him enough, one. And two, they're not getting him in space enough as he needs to be. So with Bell, with Abdullah, and Theo Riddick's been doing his thing, again, as a top 20 PPR running back. But will they figure this out with Jim Bob Cooter? Do you expect Joyke Bell to take over, Abdullah to get more? How do you look at this Lions offense going forward in a future that's a bit unknown right now with Joe Lombardi bounced?
Man, I have no idea, to be honest. And it's, as an Abdullah owner, I've actually picked up Joyke Bell in leagues where people have dropped him because I did like what I saw last week and felt like that wouldn't be a bad stash, especially down the stretch where we were going to get to see what they do. I mean, I think that one of the things that worked, or a hint of working over the past couple of weeks before Lombardi was sent packing, is that you saw some of these more kind of counter action looks to Abdullah where he was getting yards, where you see him they weren't pulling a guard, but they were running plays where he would do a little bit of a counter step before the exchange, and they would just go downhill and he'd do fairly well. They ran some gap plays and he did successfully on those as well. And so if they feel comfortable with at least one of their guards to be able to pull and get to the spot that they need to, then that could be a nice play for a quick back like Abdullah, who can hit that hole hard and be able to get into the open field up the middle that way. And then they're not being predictable with just running toss plays or draw plays to him. And that's the thing that they have to figure out is, I mean, I agree with you, Cecil. Getting him in space is probably the most important thing that they can do. But I would also say that, you also have to have some sort of versatility to your offense that at least teams look at it and they go, well, it's not, if it's going to be inside, it's just going to be a draw play, or they're going to toss it, or they're going to run some sort of crazy inside screen that never seems to work very well whenever they try to do it. I mean, it's for week after week I watch this. So I'm hoping that Jim Bob Cooter will look at this and use a little bit of that country common sense that his name seems to elicit, which would be to, if the screen isn't working, don't run the screen. Let's try something else that might. So I think that Joyke Bell, if he's rounded, this week we'll get a chance to see a little bit better if he's truly rounding into form. And I mean, we saw signs of it. I'm a little more optimistic that could be the case. I mean, Theo Riddick, to me, I mean, I've never been a big fan of him as a running back, as a pass catcher. Excellent. He looks like the most decisive, quickest back on the field. Honestly, I mean, I know that Abdullah looks like he could be the best back in that depth chart with what we see in flashes, but play after play after play with what they've been running, Riddick has been the best guy. And I just, I love his movement. I love the ability. I love the burst. And he just seems like he knows exactly what he needs to do. The question now is, are they going to change it up enough that it's going to cause Riddick to have to think a little bit more, and then he's going to have to make the adjustments. So, to me, the safe play is that you probably have one of Riddick or Abdullah. If you can get Bell and you don't have to trade for him, you can pick him up the waiver wire. Go ahead and do it. Stash him, especially if you've just been rotating guys in and out of your waiver wire on your roster as somebody that might work out for you down the stretch in your playoffs down the line, and who could be that replacement for any of your starters who are playing really well but might end up getting benched due to the pre-playoff rest periods that good teams give their top players.
Well, usually we see coaching changes after you come back from London. This time they're like, nah, you're not even – we're saving your seat. It's going to Jim Bob Cooter. And listen, with Joique Bell, again, they've stuck with him. They've gone to him too much. And now it looks like maybe their patience will be paying off. As guys get healthier, we need to step through this Houston situation, and there's messages on the Audible if you're tuned in to what we say on the show, Matt. And I gave a little tribute because Bloom and I were talking after the Texans game and after Arian Foster lost for the year. I was like, what can we do? What can we do to tribute Arian Foster? Well, just remember the good times, man. Remember the good times. That's the thing. I also used a song from Wasp called Godless Run to give my little tribute to Arian Foster. Great. So great to watch him. Now, I don't know how much we're going to see greatness from the Houston offense. Like, this really changes what Hoyer can do, and it's against Tennessee, who's not good at defending the run. The Browns ran the ball effectively. No, sorry, Matt, but they ran the ball effectively against Tennessee earlier this year. Alfred Blue, Chris Polk, let's throw Jonathan Grimes into the conversation. And I've painted the picture like this, and you can tell me if you think I'm on track or if there's something that needs to be updated. If you believe that the Texans defense is going to control a game and their offense is going to run the rock and use the big banger between the tackles, well, that's Alfred Blue, and that means Blue's the one to have value. If you believe that the Texans defense will pretty much stink and they're going to throw 50 times a game, well, then to me, that's Chris Polk as the value because he was such a great receiver. Again, at the Senior Bowl, a little pudgy. Don't be a bad body. People like, oh, the underwear Olympics. Why do guys do that? You know why they do that? So they get drafted. Don't be a bad body. Shaq Barrett, bad body. Chris Polk, bad body. Benny Fowler, I think, kind of some pre-draft stuff as well. But anyway, point is this. Chris Polk is a very talented receiver, very gifted as a receiving back and better than a runner than he's ever been given credit for. Chronic shoulder problems at Washington caused him to fall undrafted. Also, that bad body that he showed at the Senior Bowl weigh-in. And then Jonathan Grimes throws it in there, and that's kind of where it throws my Polk discussion into a little bit of a kink, Matt, because Blue we know, and we know what he can do. Polk, I would be excited to see more from, especially because he is such a great receiver. And then there's Grimes thrown into the mix. So at the end of the day, are any of these guys the answer for fantasy owners? Are we staring at some sort of three-headed running back by committee now that Arian Foster is done?
I think what you're going to see is probably about, 40% of Blue, 40% of Polk, and 20% of Grimes. And really it depends. I think the way that you laid it out there is fairly accurate. I think this week in particular, it depends on how well the Titans get off to a good start as an offense. If they struggle, and they are capable of struggling against bad defenses, then you could see Blue start off fairly well, and then maybe the Titans turn it on, and then they go to Polk a little bit more, and you're going, well, man, Blue was having a good game to start off here. And he had 40, 50 yards in the first half. And then they went away from him because, early in the third quarter, the Titans end up, scoring a couple of times. Maybe they have a takeaway, on Hoyer. And then next thing the game script changes in that way. I would probably start with Blue this week, and he would be the guy that I would probably feel most comfortable with, because I think this is the week where Tennessee could break out in a way with Mettenberger where you could see some big plays, but I wouldn't be counting on it. And I would probably say that it's the type of thing where this is probably, if it's going to be a higher scoring game, it will probably be a closer game. And as a result of that, Blue will be in it, throughout the weekend, will be in it throughout all four quarters. And you could count on him to probably get 12 to 15 touches at least. And that should get you in the area of 60 to 80 yards, which is serviceable.
Let's move down to Tampa and talk about the Buccaneers and their interesting situation. Of course, Vincent Jackson banged up, not going to play. In steps Dante Dye. I don't think anyone's going to start him or play him, or maybe even roster him. Do love the spelling of his name, though, because it's like, okay, now I got to remember it's Donteea. So Dante Die as a guy that could see a little bit more good quickness. We saw him score the touchdown. Of course, Division III prospect, I believe, Matt Heidelberg. Off the top of my head. Yeah. Okay. And I bring up this discussion because I want to talk about Charles Sims. Like, okay, people are saying, well, then more passes for Severian Jenkins. And I agree, Severian Jenkins coming back from his injury. If he's good to go, then it sounds like a nice play. But I think that Sims could do his best Lance Dunbar impression and catch 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 catches this week for Tampa. And Sims, with that speed, showing a little bit more burst. Still a bit rigid. He does run with stiff hips, so he's a rigid runner, but he's a swift runner, and he gets that top speed pretty quickly. We're seeing Charles Sims maybe as a nice what-the-heck flex play this week and maybe outperform what people think. And going up against Atlanta, in Atlanta, what do you expect from this Tampa offense, specifically from Sims?
Well, I mean, I think I've liked Sims, and I've actually mentioned on Twitter this week that if there may be a good argument that you can make that Tampa Bay has the best 1-2 punch of running backs for fantasy football in terms of not 1-2 punch, but starter and handcuff. I would say that Sims could be a very good handcuff. He has run extremely well this year. You see the burst there, like you mentioned. He's been able to break tackles. He's shown good second effort. I think that he's shown good vision. He does not have Doug Martin's vision. It's not, it's not the same. Doug Martin is probably a step up from him, but at the same time, what I saw from Sims, I was very impressed. And yeah, he's a stiff-hipped runner. I think it's a very good assessment of what he is. But so is DeMarco Murray. So is a player like Darren McFadden. It's a kind of about fit of what you're looking for there. And I compared him along that range when he came out of, actually when he transferred from Houston to West Virginia. And he was impressive at the Senior Bowl. We got a chance to see him there. I thought he had a very good week.
He's Matt Forte, remember? Everyone's like, "That's Matt Forte."
Yeah, no, but but he did have a nice week. And he's I think that we see here that the combination of what they've been able to do on the interior part of the offensive line has helped out a lot. Jameis Winston's ability to target players downfield. And even, I really do believe this. It may not be something that I can prove, but the fact that Jameis Winston is so willing to throw downfield and hit some very tight window throws, even when his receivers were dropping them left and right for the first several weeks. And now that they're hitting him, we're hearing everyone talk about how great he looks. But he was looking great all along. It's just people were dropping these high difficulty throws that he was making. But I think the fact that he was able to do that, defenses looked at and said, wow, he's hitting these throws. They're just dropping him. We have to be careful about what we do here. We have to honor the deep game, even if they're not catching it. So I think that because of that, it's opened the run game a little bit more. And I'm with you. I think that I may not look at it, and I'm not as optimistic about as many catches, because I think that Doug Martin is a good enough receiver that you're going to see him get plenty himself. But I do think that he could be a solid flex play for you. If you start 3 or 4 running backs, if you start 4, you definitely want him in there. If you start 3, I definitely can see the argument for putting him in there because he's played very well.
Well, and I'll say this, and we've said it before on this show, but what Jameis Winston has done this year is more impressive than what Mariota has done.
Yeah.
And Mariota had the hot start and everything. I know Mariota got hurt, whatever, but Winston's playing quarterback, okay? Yeah. And he's playing pro quarterback, and that may sound like lazy analysis, like he's playing. But he's making the decisions. He's going through the progressions. He's challenging the edges of the defense. He's throwing with incredible pass placement, leading receivers, putting it on the correct shoulder, and he's flicking it, man. I love it. I love watching Jameis in the pocket, and it's dangerous to say this or think this, Matt, but this is what a great quarterback should look like early on. Now, not every quarterback, I mean, we've had some great rookie seasons from quarterbacks, but it wouldn't surprise me if someday Jameis Winston was thought of higher than Andrew Luck.
You know,
Bottom line. And look at the decisions Luck make. Everyone's, it's the offensive line and the receivers. Look at Luck. He's still throwing too many picks. I know he's hurt, whatever, offensive line sucks, but we still have to go to making decisions. Winston is throwing picks, but it looks like he may not make those decisions in the future.
I think the potential for that argument to be made there's good potential there. I was like you, week one, in my gut check column I put out every week, first week, I was like, look, Marcus Mariota, great game, great execution of the game plan and scheme, but we're looking at a player who basically, and I know this sounds bad on Mariota, and I don't mean it that way, but they basically gave him training wheels to start off his NFL career. Lots of 3-step drops, a couple of 5-step drops, couple of intermediate throws, mostly quick, rock step, 1-step, 2-step, and throw short, and the defense couldn't really handle it. And now that defenses are picking up what he's doing, they're dropping fast enough that they're taking that away. Now he's having to deal with showing some pocket presence, and he's got some, but it's not great pocket presence, and he's not a great runner. He's very fast, but he's a straight line-ish kind of runner. You don't see a lot of that from him. You don't see him throwing deep balls very often at all. And the field's compressed for him. Jameis Winston, from the beginning, he's taking 5- and 7-step drops, and when that last step hits, he's got somebody in his face that he has to avoid, climb the pocket, and make the throw. And he was able to do that consistently with some very difficult throws, like over the back shoulder of a defender so that he could squeeze it in, and he's hitting all these plays. And yeah, he makes a dumb play every once in a while. He makes some plays where he thinks that he can throw the ball through the chest of the defender and still get there to the receiver. He doesn't always see the guys dropping. He's going to make those mistakes. Andrew Luck still makes those mistakes. Years ago I profiled the fact that the zone blitz was a big bugaboo for Andrew Luck, that it always bothered him. And when you get pressure on him, and you drop guys where he's supposed to be looking but can't quite expect, maybe, unless he's really looking at it, he tends to throw picks. He tends to get rattled a little bit in certain degrees. He's a great athlete. He's got a great mind for the game, but he has some blind spots like everybody else. And Jameis Winston, as his receivers have been able to catch the ball a little bit better, as he's gotten through his mistakes, yeah, I'm with you. And I've recommended to people, I believe I've put him in my dynasty rankings either at the top of the second tier or at the bottom of the first tier for anybody who's building mid to long term on a quarterback, because I always recommend I like to recommend just pay the premium and get a Rivers, a Brady, an Aaron Rodgers, get one of those guys and just pay the money, because then you don't have to have like 3, 4, or 5 quarterbacks on your roster, and you can save that for the high turnover of running back and receiver. But when you have a guy like this, he's, to me, looks like it's like Russell Wilson. I always liked Russell Wilson. It was the same type of thing. You see it with Winston. He's very poised. He loves the game. Bloom and I talked about this earlier this week, that he just looks like he could play 3 more games after that last one. Like, let's just keep playing football. Kenny Bell, his roommate, was like, I'm not getting any sleep in training camp because Jameis Winston is staying up all night studying football because he loves it so much. He's like so excited every night to be like working on football. So that type of thing, the fact that his teammates will like walk off a cliff for him, all those things, you put it together and you have a guy who is a total gym rat, who plays the game with great anticipation, good pocket presence, never say die attitude, and total confidence that he always played through his mistakes. And that's the thing that was always maddening for people. But you got to understand, that's one of the biggest qualities that you have to have as a good or a great quarterback in the NFL, is that you can screw, like we joked around it this summer. He could kick the gas can over and like completely turn an inferno out of his team and completely burn them to the crisp in the first half, and then come back and turn that flamethrower around onto the defense. And the fact that he's like, look, yeah, I screwed up, whatever. We're down 21-0 right now. We're still in it, and then make the throws that they're like, wow, we really are still in it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's at worst a top 5 to 7 quarterback for the rest of his career once this team really gets to a point where that they can all gel.
Well, and the thing is, when we get the quarterbacks coming out of college, and college game is completely different, but this guy's making pro decisions. And we always talk pro ready. What does pro ready mean? Pro ready is Jameis Winston. And I want to be very clear before Colts fans or internet trolls get after me. Like, I have all the world's respect for Andrew Luck. He is better than Jameis Winston right now. But I'm saying if Luck continues on his trajectory, which is not improving as much as we want him to, and we thought he would, Jameis will pass him. Okay? On this trajectory and what he's capable of doing. So again, all the world's respect to Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck's fantastic and the face of the NFL and the future of the NFL. But this whole like blaming Pagano and Irsay and everything, and Ryan Grigson doesn't know what he's doing and all this, like I talked to Russ Landy this week, Matt, and of course you and I are good friends with Russ, and Russ is very close to Pagano and very close to Grigson. And he was like, listen, this families fight, families, they have situations that arise, and this is part of that process. And he kind of alluded to, about Luck, clean some things up. Like, and again, we're not just going to blow bubbles at Andrew Luck. And you know what I mean by saying that. We're not just going to be like, oh, he's fantastic. No, Luck is making mistakes. He's looking bad. And he needs to improve on that if he want, and they're going to go to the playoffs. Okay, that's AFC South, right? They're going to win the division and all that. But if they want to do anything, and if Pagano wants to keep his job, Andrew Luck's got to play better, man. I mean, that you saw the whole team rise up. This team has rallied together, and they've seemed to rally around Pagano at times, and then it's Luck making mistakes that keeps him short.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's still a young player. I mean, I think that you have to understand that. And actually, I'm just looking at an interception that New England just got here off of Tannehill with early in the fourth quarter here, still down 22-7 here. But getting back to that, I mean, certainly, Luck being the problem with quarterback prospects is that when people give the hype of he's the best prospect to come along in decades since the 83 draft, he's one of the smartest prospects that we have ever seen. Frank Gore's like, he's a god in the film room in terms of, how he understands the game. That's great. Again, I bring up this analogy a lot, but quarterback play is like playing chess during a barroom brawl. Okay. you could be a chess master, but if you can't move around and handle everything flying around at you, or the fact that when you put, you move your rook over to this certain square and your opponent picks it up, bites it off in his teeth and spits it out back at you and then punches you in the face, you still have to kind of get back up and figure out what your next move's going to be, and handle that while all the melee is going on. And I think that Luck is good at that, but he's still fallible there. So all that intelligence is great, but then you still have somebody like Tim Tebow, whom I don't think was one of the more, from a football standpoint, one of the more intelligent quarterbacks around. But if you get in scrambling around with the barroom brawl, there was a part of that where he could handle himself. Brett Favre was someone who had that great mix of intelligence and being able to just catch as catch can what was going on. And you need that. And so, I look at this and I agree with you. I do think that, when you talk about pro-ready quarterbacks too, I mean, the things that you're talking about are, are you making 3, 5, and 7 step drops? Do you understand how to use multiple types of play action where you can, pivot or reverse pivot, where you can roll out and throw, where you can also climb the pocket, keep your, stay within a stance where you can throw the ball and let that ball loose, and to be able to hit receivers all over the field. And you may not do all those things right all the time. You may not integrate them all at the right moment and with great efficiency all the time, but those are the things that make you pro ready. It's not whether or not you're super fast or you have a super strong arm, or whether you can break tackles, or where you can run 3 types of plays extremely well, better than anybody else. You have to have that full gamut of work. And Luck is still building on it. He's got some new players around him. We've talked about Pep Hamilton's scheme for years, wondering if that's a great fit or not, especially with some of the personnel that they have. And it also gets to you. If you're dealing with all the hits and sacks that you have to deal with, and he's playing hurt right now. On top of that, you might be a little cautious. You might press a little bit on certain things that you normally don't press at, and you make mistakes. And I think that he's dealing with the cumulative effects of injury and the fact that he's getting the crap knocked out of him on a weekly basis.
If there's any inefficiency from Grigson and company, it's that. It's not putting the offensive line around him to be better. He's your number one asset. He's a $125 million guy. Do everything you possibly can. Have shut your mouth receivers. Instead of drafting Philip Dorsett, when you've made all these other transactions and, Andre Johnson picked up and Deron Carter picked up, Dorsett's awesome. How about some offensive line help? You already got Moncrief. There are ways, and it's not that Dorsett's bad at all. It's just okay, what about your line?
Yeah, overkill. And look at Atlanta. I mean, Matt Ryan is not Andrew Luck in terms of overall talent.
No.
But Matt Ryan, when he had Gonzalez, a White in his prime, and an ascendant Julio Jones, was a top 5 fantasy quarterback, top 5 quarterback probably in the league, arguably. When he didn't have an offensive line and they started to go down and he only had maybe 1 or 2 of those guys that were playing decently, he was a top 7 to 12 quarterback, more or less. And it was amazing that he was even that good. Julian Edelman just scores in the flat here on the left, around the 3 and kind of takes it in here. But he was, I still look at Matt Ryan and I'm in awe of the fact that up until this year, when they didn't have a running game and didn't have an offensive line, that he stayed healthy and kept them in games and was still a productive fantasy quarterback. Andrew Luck to me is, if this offensive line continues that route, you're going to see him be that guy where everyone goes, well, he could be so much better if he just had time.
Yeah, and we'll see. And hopefully, I even hate to bring up this name because the football gods are cruel, but you don't want to see him David Card. You know what I mean? David Card, there was more there. There was. I'll go to my grave saying that. There was more there with David Carr. All the stuff. How we're excited about Derek Carr. David was better, and he was a better athlete. And even coaches and family members that I've talked to around that family all admit, Derek's really good. David was the man. Okay. So get it right, Indianapolis. You have something very special. You need to take care of it. It is the Audible Live. Here are Thursday nights, youtube.com/footballguys.com, DOTCOM. And as we round in, it's 15 minutes more. So Here, Matt, I wanted to bring something up, and I love going down memory lane with you. I love our road trips. I love talking football with you whenever we get a chance. And I brought this up on one of our previous shows, but I'll bring it up here with you so I can share the story. Because now is the time, and Bloom called it the fresh legs back. I remember years ago for the Houston Oilers when Gary Brown ran for 1,000 yards in 8 games. And, it was fantastic. And I remember going back because I collect football cards. So I was like, Gary Brown rookie. And I had a bunch of Gary Brown, they were scrubby cards. And now it's woo, I got something. Not really, but still. It's not like I put myself through college selling off Gary Brown rookies, but it was really, it was great. I was like, the guy is 1,000 yards, 8 games, 1,000 yards. And it was great. Kevin Jones. God, I loved Kevin Jones. God bless America. Anyway, I almost cussed there. I love Kevin Jones. 1,000 yards, 8 games. C.J. Anderson, it was 1,000 all-purpose yards, and it was 6 games. Okay? 6 games, 1,000 all-purpose yards. So now it is about the time. We're sitting here at week 8, Matt. Okay? Now it's about the time when somebody's going to break out and could have that nice second half of the season. You could benefit by picking them up off your waiver wire right now. And I've got a couple of options. I've put my chips, and I spoiled this for the listeners already, but I put my chips on David Cobb. David Cobb, to me, is that guy. They're just going to give him the job. They will give him, and don't give me, it's going to be a committee and Dexter McCluster. You don't need Dexter McCluster or Antonio Andrews. You certainly don't need Bishop Sankey at all, but you don't need any of that when you got David. And put McCluster out at slot receiver. Okay, that's what he is. Slot. Put him in the slot. Anyway, damn it. This team is going to give that ball to David Cobb. I love him as one of those fresh legs backs that comes in the second half of the season. And let's not say 1,000 yards, but I bet you this. I bet he's real fantasy relevant coming in as a starting back. You can get a starter, a good starter, because, again, when it comes to fantasy football, player X goes down. Well, what's his backup? Like, everyone rushes the waiver wire. The backups have to be good. You have to be good. David Cobb is really effing good, okay? So that's the guy I put on as my fresh legs back. If I'm going to put some chips down on the table, Black 17, baby. Follow me to Fat Stacks. Getting those T-shirts printed up for Vegas, Matt, by the way. Another one that I very interested, Orleans Darkwa. I got a soft spot for them Tulane backs, man. I don't really know why, but
you and just Louisiana in general, man.
I know. I guess I should move there. But Liam wants to go to LSU. I was like, do it, go. Anyway, point is this: Orleans Darkwa, David Cobb. You know, you've got some options. Maybe Stephen Ridley. You know, Chris Ivory is awesome, and he's also hurt all the time. Maybe Ridley gets fresh, takes over that job when Ivory gets banged up. Like, there's some options here. Do you have any back in mind? Your thoughts on Cobb, your thoughts on Darkwa, your thoughts on Ridley? Those are three that I've pegged as potential, you know, fresh legs backs as we enter the second half of the season. Is there anyone you like here, Matt?
Sure. I mean, I think all those guys are interesting, and I've added some of those guys, at least 2 or 3 of those guys when I've had the opportunity to. Darkwa was one of them. I mean, I like what I saw on that one drive, and it was enough to understand that he's decisive. He has a good first step. He can catch. We've always seen him catch the ball well out of the backfield, and he runs through contact fairly well. He's a good finisher. And this is a situation, too, where the coaching staff said to Tom Coughlin, we need this guy on the field. When are you going to get him on the field? And he finally just acceded to their wishes, and he had a nice series. And I know that was all it was. But I think that he's going to get more opportunities down the line. And, you know, Jennings can't stay healthy. He doesn't look great. Shane Vereen is he's a third down back, really. And then you have Andre Williams, who I've just never liked at all in terms of his potential. So I think Darkwood does have a shot there. And this is a team that's looking for weapons other than Odell Beckham that can be consistent. They need a consistent second weapon there. And he might have an opening there. Cobb, I mean, obviously, we both like Cobb. You liked him probably the most of both of us, but very good screen player, very good power runner, someone who can catch the ball downfield in an underrated way. And I think he actually showed out in the preseason when he was healthy enough to play. He had some really nice moments. So yeah, I mean, if you're right that they're going to start him right off the bat, and they're not going to get stubborn about saying Dexter McCluster is going to be part of that committee, or we really like what Antonio Brown has done, or Antonio Andrews has done, then yeah, I think that Cobb can be that kind of grinder for you, who can get you, 4 yards a carry, who can do, get you the short yardage, but also be effective for you in the screen game if they were to run screens. And I think that they would with a back like him if they were smart, looking at what they saw from him on tape at Minnesota. Other backs that I think are interesting just to keep an eye on, and they're not guys that you're going to want to add, but they're guys that you're just going to want to think about. One you probably already have. I mean, you've already got guys like Andre Ellington, stashed away, but a guy like Tywan Jones. If Latavius Murray gets hurt, Tywan Jones, to me, has looked very good every time I've seen him as a running back. He reminds me a little bit of Chris Johnson. He's got that speed. He has that very good initial quickness. He's very light on his feet, and he's willing to finish in a way that he can be a little bit physical, even for his size. And there's a reason why the Raiders, after trying him out at cornerback, switched him back to running back, and he is the second string guy. He is ahead of Halou when he was healthy, and he wasn't healthy for a couple of weeks, but they put him right back in there. So he's a guy I'd keep an eye on. If something happens to Murray, Robert Turbin, I'm not unbelievably excited about Robert Turbin, but Duke Johnson has had concussion issues in the past and has been banged up before. Isaiah Crowell has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. I believe it's a toe injury. He might be someone that you might want to look at because he's had some moments here and there. So, and then the third one is Jerick McKinnon. Every time Jerick McKinnon gets on the field, I've seen some really good stuff from him. He just looks he looks even more confident than he did last year. The burst is there. He's almost a freakish athlete in his own right. And I think that if anything were to happen to Adrian Peterson, McKinnon would still be a very fantasy relevant back and be helpful to this offense. And it wouldn't be as much the Matt Asiata show as what we saw last year.
You make me throw up in my mouth talking about Matt Asiata. He's just a fullback. Why would you want to start him? Oh, yeah, 3 carries, 3 touchdowns. Thanks, fantasy gods. Anyway, it's a fun job. It's a fun job, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Waldman, at Matt Waldman on Twitter. I'm at Cecil Lammy. The show is at The Audible. Sharkandrick West, Matt, we need to have a discussion there because without Stephon Tuitt, with Stephon Tuitt down and the Steelers bend but don't break defense, it broke against Kansas City. And again, for me, it's never rush to the waiver wire to get the backup. Let's look at the situation. Let's look at the talent. Like we talked about with the Houston backups before, we know that the situation is they love West and they want to keep giving him the ball. Is he good? I mean, at the end of the day, I could flower it up in a million different ways, Matt, but I'm just going to toss it to you like this. Is he good? Because when I watched Sharkandrick West, and against the Steelers, he was good, okay, 100 yards, all right? But listeners and viewers also need to know that in that game, hit some big-ass holes, okay? And you're not going to get that every week. And the Steelers, no Stephon Tuitt down. Listen, that team gave it up, all right? They gave it up like Halloween candy and not the type where you go to the door and knock, but just when they have the bucket on the step and there's a take one, because they're too lazy to answer the door. That's how the Steelers gave it up. So with West, okay, and I feel in a way, and there's certain games like this, like Carlos Hyde, right? If Minnesota or Team X is going to lay down, then Carlos Hyde can be really damn good. And I like Carlos Hyde better than I like Sharkandrick West, and I don't really like Carlos Hyde that much. I've always said it about Joe McKnight. Like Joe McKnight had a 150-yard game once, people. With West, is he good? Will the talent, which is a lower level, meet up with that situation again where KC faces an opponent that's so poor the way that the Steelers are?
Yeah, it will, but I won't say he's good overall. He's pretty good at running downhill. I think the problem that, you highlighted the Steelers situation very well, and that is something that everyone must take into account, and it is very true what you said. At the same time, I will add that another component that was a factor involved of last week is that 2 weeks prior, they were still running plays that were really designed best for Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles, he of probably the best footwork that you're going to see of any back in the league right now. He's the type of back that they can run off tackle plays. They can run outside, slower developing plays to the perimeter where he can pick his way through to the line of scrimmage and make cutbacks and just read with great patience in the way that even Le'Veon Bell's capable of, though they tend to run those plays with Le'Veon Bell up the middle more than they do to the outside. But with Charles, so light-footed, they were able to do that, and he could make those plays. They tried to do that a little bit with Sharkandrick West, and he's just not that patient. He doesn't have that kind of footwork, and he doesn't have that kind of vision. But when they got him going downhill and he didn't have to make as many decisions but still run out of the zone, he did fairly well. He did a little bit better. That's how I would put it. And I think that it's going to be I think they found what they can do with him and what they shouldn't do. And as long as they stick to that game plan, I think everything will be fine. We just saw Brandon LaFell catch a nice little quick hitter up the seam to get to the 30 here, which was a nice play of over 25 yards here. So he's getting a little bit more involved in this game here with New England. But yeah, I mean, he's a high-end spark athlete who had, a lot of nice, athletic ability in terms of the combine type of data that you would track. But it's about really how you put it all together. And I would say that he's still a developmental player who's forced into that situation. I'm still, this is just because I'm a big fan of him, but I still like Spencer Ware. I still think that Spencer Ware is a guy that I would get familiar with his name, because later in the season, if anything happened to West, and we know what's going on with Niles Davis, that Ware might get on the field and get a little bit more playing time. And he's good enough in terms of a tackle breaker. He has enough burst that as a tackle breaker, and his running in terms of vision between the tackles is much better. He could be a guy that might surprise really late for your playoff run. Not a guy to add, just a guy to get familiar with his name.
Well, and here's the thing. Of the three former Seattle backs that are kind of floating around, we talked about Turbin, of course, Christine Michael, which we have yet to bring up, and then Spencer Ware. Like, Ware could be the best of all of them. Turbin wore down at Utah State. He wore down in game. He wore down during the season at Utah State. And Michael, while I certainly appreciate that talent and those jackhammer legs,
listen,
is it going to happen with this guy? I mean, he's such a knucklehead that you have to keep waiting on it. A lot of fantasy owners have already moved on if they picked him up. Maybe if you got super patience and the depth on your bench, obviously the talent is there. And at the end of the day, I've said this before, Matt, you and I are talent evaluators. We have to be situation evaluators when we look at fantasy situations. But for draft, we're talent evaluators. And damn it, Christine Michael's pretty damn talented. I just wish he wasn't such a knucklehead and he'd get a shot on the field.
Yeah. Edelman just scores again. Second touchdown of the day here in the same spot, pretty much. But looking 7 for 81, 2 touchdowns. But yeah, talking about Christine Michael and Ware and Turbin. Here's the deal that we need to remember here is that when Spencer Ware was with Seattle, they actually used him for the first couple of weeks before he got hurt, and they used him in regular season games, and they liked him and his future as a running back. I was told this by someone who's close enough to the organization, who has been a scout and consults with the league, that they really liked him as a running back. The problem is in consecutive years, he got DUIs and he was hurt. And so when you have those two type of off-field situations in your own knucklehead way, you're not going to be on that team anymore after you have the second mistake. And so he had trials with the Giants, didn't get anything, and then the Chiefs picked him up. But this is a back who I would say that Andy Reid has seen this type of back before. His name is Deuce Staley. Hard runner, good pass catcher, not extraordinarily fast, but certainly very smart. And I think that that's what we're going to end up seeing, if Ware can get his opportunity. Michael, I don't know what's going to happen with him. The way I look at it here is that these running backs in Dallas are good enough to basically stay on the field ahead of him as long as they don't do anything stupid. Well, Joseph Randle, his arrest, 1 to 2 game suspension possibly looming here. That leaves Darren McFadden. We know that Darren McFadden runs extremely hard. He also breaks himself running that hard. So, he does have that opportunity to come, and I would hold on to him. If he's on your waiver wire and you have the luxury to drop a player where you're strong at a position, do so. Why not? Take the chance. But it's a long shot, because we've seen, you don't get drafted in the middle rounds of a draft with that kind of talent without a reason. And the reason is that he just was not a mature guy when it came to really applying his talent at the level that he would be capable of exploiting it and being, an elite back in this league, because his ability points towards that. But it takes more than talent to be a great player.
And a great pro. Really, I don't think Mike Sherman's going to be sending Christine Michael any Christmas cards. Let's just say that. Let's wrap up the show. You talk about long shots, Matt, and I did want to bring up a couple of guys. One that's kind of on the radar and one that's not on the radar at all. So let's talk about the Atlanta situation to wrap up the show. People are saying, okay, Leonard Hankerson banged up. That means Roddy White can do something. Roddy White's my sleeper. Do you believe he's Benjamin Button? Okay, because if you think he's Benjamin Button, then Roddy White's your guy. I'm looking at Justin Hardy. Actually, I'm also interested in Nick Williams. A little engine that could. Nick Williams out there making plays. But Justin Hardy, ECU, rookie, coming in for Atlanta. What are your thoughts here in this situation developing potentially for Hardy?
I like Hardy's quickness, and Hardy certainly shows some ability to make some contested
I'll say this, Matt. I don't want to interrupt you, but he thinks he's Steve Smith because he's so damn feisty. Now he's not, and he's not fast, and he has a terrible lower body, and not a good enough bubble like Steve Smith. So I like the mental part. Like I think I'm Steve Smith. Like, yeah, you're not, but I like that you think that.
Yeah, it's like Jamison Crowder, who I always say is this close to being that. I think Justin Hardy is kind of is similar in terms of mindset. He thinks he's this close, but he's probably about that far away. But my honest answer with the Falcons situation is, if you're going to pick a guy who's going to pick up the slack, and help out in this receiving game, it's not a wide receiver. It's Jacob Tamme. Jacob Tamme has gotten more targets. He's gotten more high leverage targets. And if Matt Ryan wasn't so inaccurate on a couple of those plays, Jacob Tamme had opportunities to catch 2 touchdowns in that game last week. And he's been getting more of these high leverage opportunities. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think that he winds up being a possible flex for you in a desperation situation. Roddy White, I love him as a player over the years, but it's over for him. He is not the type of player that he once was. And as we're seeing Kenny Stills continue to get more involved, and they hit a nice tight window seam route with 5 minutes left, down 36-7. I don't think we're going to need to give any more game updates at this stage.
There's no moral victory here tonight.
No moral victory, even though Tannehill has 254 yards. He also has 2 interceptions. I'm still glad I traded him 3 weeks ago. But to say when we talk about Roddy White, the only thing about that he's been Benjamin Button about is that before the team told him to calm down and gave him a little bit of a pacifier, he was whining like a baby about not getting enough targets. And at this stage of the game, I mean, he's going to always be a fixture for Atlanta, but he doesn't have the quickness. He doesn't have the ability to make the hard cuts anymore. And so you're looking at Nick Williams as a slow developing player, a guy who runs, the crossing routes or the deeper crosses, as the backside play action guy who can be your third option on a check down, or maybe be a screen player for you. So Hardy does have a real opportunity here. If he can somehow channel that Steve Smith and be the little train that could, the choo-choo, and like suddenly work his way up the hill to Steve Smith, then yeah, we might see a major surprise here, but I wouldn't count on it. I think your safest play is Jacob Tamme.
Now, a guy that's off the radar, and maybe he shouldn't be because he had a nice game at home in Detroit, but it's Michigan State's very own Benny Fowler. And the reason I say this, not only because watching Benny Fowler and knowing how good he is and remembering that he timed at Michigan State Pro Day in the high 4.3s, and reminded me a little Marcus Colson, a little Anquan Bolden, probably more Bolden with more straight line-ish speed. Benny Fowler coming out of Michigan State. Broncos pick him up. Nice game against Detroit. Not a lot there since. Coming out of the bye, there is an emphasis and there is a buzz building about a third wide receiver to emerge. And it's not Cody Latimer, unfortunately. Cody's going to need a quarterback change. Bottom line. I'll say that because I get questions about Cody still. When Peyton Manning's not the quarterback, Cody will do better. I think, I'm playing with Peyton Manning. I think it gets in his head. I know Manning's yelled at him. We've seen it on camera, so I'm not revealing anything there. But like that type of pressure has been too much for my dude Cody. Talent's still there. He makes a ton of plays in practice with Brock Osweiler, okay? And I know that you don't get fantasy points for that, but just know that there's talent there. But I want to talk about Benny Fowler because the buzz is now around Denver that it's not working with the tight ends. Gary Kubiak talking about using Richard Gordon more and as a blocker so they can free up Virgil Green. We've discussed that. But what about Fowler running seam routes, running basically tight end routes, because he is a physical player who's got some bulk to him, can run after the catch, and is not afraid to run those middle routes. So could we see maybe the Broncos show an emphasis? And the Broncos are going to have to score points. You can't screw around with this. We only got 2 weapons on offense, all right? You're going to score points when you're going up against New England, when you're going up against Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, San Diego twice, and, of course, Green Bay coming out of the bye right now. Could we see more of Benny Fowler?
Sure. I mean, if you're noticing that the comfort level's there with him, then why not? I mean, Rashay Caldwell was certainly a guy that there was a comfort level with at one time. So I can certainly see how this would transpire. And if you're able to use him right, and I think that as long as Peyton Manning and Gary Kubiak can get on the same page of how this guy should be used and how they should target him, it could work out very well.
And there we have it. That is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Audible Live every Thursday night. Bloom was on assignment. He'll be back next week. Matt Waldman, you can follow him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. The show is at The Audible. Dr. Gene Bramall is at Gene Bramall. And I'm at Cecil Lammy saying we make it simple. And thank you very much for listening, for watching, for subscribing on our YouTube channel, for subscribing on iTunes, for subscribing to footballguys.com and our free daily newsletter as well. He's Matt Waldman. I'm Cecil Lammy. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. A safe Halloween, too. And as always, stay spooky and stay frosty.
Ooh.